My name is Nevaeh. At 32, preparing for the birth of my first child, all I wanted was one afternoon untouched by the chaos my family, specifically my younger sister Nicole, usually created. I was a corporate lawyer, control and order defined my life. Yet, when it came to them, I was perpetually the easy mark, the generous one, the ATM. The baby shower was supposed to be a reset, a celebration of the quiet, stable life Ethan and I had carefully constructed. The venue was warm, filled with soft chatter and the promising hum of music. Ethan, my boyfriend and partner, had watched me for months, patiently ensuring this day was perfect. He knew how much I craved peace. We had a tiered cake decorated with tiny fondant, shoes sitting centered on the display table. It looked like joy itself. The cake was the focal point, capturing the promise of our future. Then Nicole walked in. She never entered a room, she arrived, late, loud, and smiling. She moved through the room with that specific, bright excitement she got only when she was planning an intentional accident. She didn't greet Ethan, didn't even look at me with genuine happiness. Her eyes fixed instead on the cake display. She glided toward it, her hip catching the table hard enough that the stand wobbled. I saw the tears tip before my mind could register the warning. The cake hit the floor with a dull thud that sucked the air out of the room. Frosting smeared across the carpet like a spreading bruise. The silence that followed was heavy, absolute. People froze mid-sentence. Ethan's face drained white. Nicole stood over the wreckage, chin lifted, a smug little smile playing on her lips. "Wiss you're not the only one who can get attention," she said, as if it were a clever joke. A few nervous relatives tittered. Then my mother, Deborah, let out a clear, full laugh. Not a startled giggle, but a laugh that unmistakably declared her allegiance. "She's just joking," Deborah said, shaking her head as if the destruction was harmless fun. I said nothing. I didn't give Nicole the satisfaction of my anger. I walked to the kitchen, my hands steady, grabbing a drink while the sound of nervous clean up began. Everyone was moving, acting like I was supposed to smile and accept this, as I always did. But inside, something cold and final was forming. This wasn't clumsiness. It was payback for the time I refused to help her secure a line of credit. In Nicole's mind, I wasn't her sister. I was her financial resource, and I had dared to say no. The baby shower was over. The peace was gone. That night, after Ethan had gone to sleep, I opened my laptop. Nicole had been confidently telling everyone the down payment for her condo was secured and boasting about her new car, the payments for which I co-signed and handled, the years of enabling, the rent bailouts, the credit card debt I paid. It all ended here. I moved every penny slated for her condo purchase back into my personal account. Then, I called the leasing company and put a permanent stop on the car payments I was making under my name. It was not about making her feel bad. It was about establishing the permanent consequence of her actions. I stared at the confirmation emails. I knew her next move would be a desperate tantrum. I knew that soon, she would find out what I did next. At my baby shower, my sister knocked the cake to the floor and said, "Guess you're not the only one who can get attention." My mother laughed. "She's just joking." I said nothing. That night, I pulled the down payment from her condo purchase and froze her car lease. But the real shock was next morning, when she found out what I did next. The certainty of my actions from the night before settled over me like a heavy armor. I hadn't slept, but I felt an unnerving calm, waiting for the inevitable storm. Before the sun was fully up, my phone started its frantic buzzings. 5 missed calls from Nicole, followed by 3 from my mother. I left them ringing. I was in no mood for Nicole's manipulative crying or my mother's wary excuses. When I went downstairs, Ethan was already in the kitchen, scrolling through his phone. He didn't need to speak. The tight set of his jaw told me everything. Nicole had already found her way into his messages, trying to deploy her chaos from an alternate route. "Nicole's texting me non-stop," Ethan said, looking up with a worried frown. "She says the condo money disappeared, and her car company is threatening her. She wants you to call her right now." I poured myself a cup of coffee. "I'll get to it later." The delay was the point. 2 minutes later, my own phone lit up with a barrage of texts. They were long, frantic paragraphs accusing me of sabotage, of ruining her chance at stability, and of destroying her trust. She wrote that she had counted on me to come through, like I always did, and pulling the money was cruel. What made my jaw tighten was the absence of one crucial detail. She didn't mention the cake, not once. I ignored her for the rest of the morning, letting the messages stack up. Then the sound started, a heavy, insistent pounding on my front door, not a polite knock. It was the sound of a full-blown tantrum given physical force. I opened it to find Nicole, her hair messy, wearing pajama pants and an oversized hoodie. She didn't wait for an invitation. She stepped inside and started throwing accusations before the door was even closed. "You can't just take back money you promised me," she shrieked, her voice shaking with manufactured outrage. "The car lease is in your name, so you have to pay it. You're ruining everything over some little joke." I let her spiral, watching the familiar performance. Nicole was always skilled at talking circles, twisting the facts, until she sounded like the true victim. When she finally stopped to catch her breath, I looked her in the eye and delivered the clean truth. "I never promised you anything," I said, my voice dangerously steady. "What I did promise myself is that I am done being your personal bailout fund." Her voice instantly cracked. The wounded routine kicked in, the soft tremble, the eyes widening in an attempt at innocence. She claimed she was in trouble, that I didn't understand how bad things were, and that I was abandoning her. Then she glanced over my shoulder at Ethan, clearly hoping he would step in and shame me into submission. Just as she looked away, our front door opened again. It was my grandfather, George, walking in unannounced, holding a paper bag with breakfast sandwiches. He had heard about the baby shower and decided to stop by. He froze, assessing the chaotic scene, Nicole half yelling and half crying in my living room, acting like she was being murdered by a boundary. Grandpa set the bag down slowly on the counter. His voice was calm, like stone. He asked one question that cut through Nicole's noise. "Do you have any idea how many years Nevaeh has been covering for you?" Nicole tried to deflect, saying it wasn't about the past, but about this one time. Grandpa cut her off immediately. He told her behavior at the shower was disgraceful. He told her he was done watching her take advantage of me. He leaned in slightly, his eyes cold. "If you or your mother ever pull something like that again, he said, delivering the sentence that finally made Nicole's performance stutter. You'll get nothing from my estate. No money, no property, no help. Nicole was truly speechless, staring at him. She didn't have a comeback. She left a few minutes later, defeated. As I watched her car disappear down the street, I knew two things: Nicole never gives up, and her silence was now only a warning. Nicole's dramatic exit, after Grandpa George's threat, was followed by 3 days of unnerving quiet. I knew the silence was not peace. It was the calculated pause before her next maneuver. I had seen this pattern my whole life. She was planning, building a sympathetic audience, and sharpening her story. Ethan and I tried to keep things normal, but every quiet moment felt tense. Like the air was waiting for a door to slam. The first sign of her new plan came late one evening from my cousin, Laura. She called, whispering like she didn't want to be overheard. I just got pulled into a group chat, Laura said. Nicole made one, and Mom is in it, along with a few relatives. You're not. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice even. I knew the game. Nicole started with a long, tearful voice note. She described how I had blindsided her by pulling back the money she depended on, claiming the freeze on her car lease meant she couldn't get to work. She was careful to sound wounded, never responsible. And Deborah? I asked. Laura exhaled sharply. Deborah backed her up completely, saying you overreacted. She's still calling what happened at the shower a harmless joke. My stomach turned. It wasn't a surprise. But it still hurt to hear it confirmed. Then Laura's voice dropped even lower. And then your mother said something that made me angry. She said you owed Nicole for all the years. Nicole's been there for you. Owed her? The word hit me like a slap. I asked Laura for a single example of how Nicole had been there for me. But my mother dodged the question, switching tactics to talk about how family sticks together and shouldn't keep score. This was the usual maneuver. Gather a circle who only knew half the truth, perform, poor Nicole, and send them to pressure me into caving so the family could pretend everything was fine. Ethan's hand found mine, a quiet, necessary anchor. The silence between us confirmed what we both feared. They were doing it again. I'm telling you because it's getting ugly, Laura continued. Nicole is convincing people you stole from her. I opened my eyes sharply. Stealing was a different word than selfish. Stealing was a word that could be used in courtrooms and workplaces. It was a word Nicole would use if she thought it would force me to panic. I thanked Laura and hung up. I sat there, looking toward the hallway where the nursery was, the room we had built with such careful love. I felt my child's future sitting on my chest like a weight. Then my phone rang again. It was Grandpa George. His voice was calm, too calm. Nevaeh, he said. Nicole came to my place today. I stood up immediately, Ethan rising with me. Grandpa continued. She brought a folder. Evidence, she called it. Screenshots of texts, bank transfer receipts, a printout of her car lease. She tried to make it look like you broke a binding agreement. Heat rose in my face. She's lying. I know, Grandpa said, and the certainty in his voice steadied me. I let her talk for about 3 minutes. Then I cut her off. I told her point blank, she has no entitlement to your money. I told her she embarrassed herself and the family at that shower. And I told her the story she's trying to build is only proving my point. What did she say? I asked, my throat tight. She cried. Left in tears. He paused. And I reminded her what I said in your living room. Keep this up. And she and your mother will get nothing from my estate. When the call ended, I felt sick. Grandpa's words were protection. But they didn't erase the sick feeling of realizing how quickly Nicole would poison the family if she thought it would make me pay. The conflict had just gone legal. The family smear campaign continued online, but the second threat came from the leasing company. The representative sounded strained, informing me Nicole had contacted them, claiming the payment freeze was a mistake, and that I acted without her permission. Nicole was told plainly that since the account was entirely in my name, she had no leverage. She became upset and threatened legal action, then hung up. The door had closed on her financial access, and I felt a sense of protective vindication. While Nicole and Deborah were busy with their online pity campaign, Grandpa George was executing a permanent solution. He called early on a Thursday morning, his voice calm but firm. "Come over," he said. "Something important needs to be discussed." The tone was not a request for a visit, it was a summons to a decision. Ethan and I drove to his house. Grandpa was waiting at his kitchen table, a stack of papers neatly arranged beside a man I didn't recognize. The man stood, introducing himself as Grandpa's attorney. That was the moment I realized this was no longer just family drama. It was legal and irrevocable. Grandpa didn't waste time. He pushed a set of documents across the table, an updated version of his last will and testament. My pulse jumped as I skimmed the pages, expecting minor changes. Then my eyes confirmed the reality. Nicole and my mother Deborah's names were gone entirely. Not just from cash assets, but from properties, investments, and trusts. Every cent, every piece of real estate, every share of stock was now bypassed. The only beneficiaries left were me, Ethan, and a trust fund for our unborn child. I looked up sharply. "Grandpa, I didn't ask for this." He shook his head once, a firm, final movement. "You didn't have to ask. I've watched this family treat you like a resource, not a relative. I'm done letting them get away with it." Ethan's hand found the back of my chair, a steady presence that grounded me. Grandpa leaned forward, his eyes fixed on mine. "I want you to understand something, Nevaeh. They're not angry because you took something from them. They're angry because you stopped letting them take from you." Those words settled heavily in my chest. I left his house believing that was the end of the leverage they held over me. But Nicole never accepted defeat. That weekend, she appeared in my driveway unannounced. She was softer than I had seen her in years, carrying 2 coffees, her voice quiet. "I just want to talk," she said, radiating fake peace. Ethan gave me a look that signaled his complete distrust, but I let her inside. I wanted to see her final, transparent attempt. She started slow, asking about the baby. The sweetness was almost convincing, until she casually stirred her coffee and shifted the conversation. "So," she said, tilting her head with fake concern, "I heard Grandpa's been making changes to his finances. I just want to make sure he's not being taken advantage of. He's older, you know." There it was. Fishing. I gave her nothing, short answers, no details, no confirmation. Her smile tightened, and the softness cracked for a second. She left frustrated. 2 days later, Grandpa called again, this time laughing, purely at the audacity. Nicole called my lawyer, he said, pretending to be you. She gave your address, your phone number, and said she needed a copy of the most recent legal documents for personal review. My stomach dropped with a sharp, cold fear. Grandpa confirmed the lawyer had played along just long enough to confirm her identity, then ended the call and notified him immediately. Nicole had tried to impersonate me to access the will. Grandpa didn't sound surprised, he sounded resolved. I'm not letting that slide, he said. The next phase of isolation was about to begin. Grandpa George refused to let Nicole's attempt to impersonate me to his attorney slide. The following Sunday, he called a family meeting. Everyone showed up, nervous and curious, sensing a major storm, but unsure where it would land. In Grandpa's living room, he told the entire family everything: the cake incident, my decision to pull the down payment, and freeze the lease. The warning he had given Nicole and Deborah in my living room. Then, he delivered the bomb. Nicole had tried to impersonate me, to illegally access his will. The room went still. Relatives who had been defending Nicole online stared at the floor. Nicole sat rigid, her cheeks flushed, searching desperately for a story that could save her. Even my mother didn't try to argue. Grandpa finished with a thunderclap. If anyone in this family sides with Nicole in trying to manipulate Nevaeh, you're cut off, too. No exceptions. It was an act of total isolation, stripping Nicole of her audience and her safety net. She was left exposed. I watched her, and I knew her well enough to understand that she would not accept defeat quietly. The next move she made was pure, reckless desperation. 2 weeks later, I was at work when Ethan called. His voice was calm, but the edge underneath made my pulse race. Nicole just walked into the house, he said. What? I sat up straight. Did she knock? No, he replied. She came through the side door like she lives here. She says she's here to get her things. She doesn't have anything here. I insisted. I know, Ethan said, but she forced her way toward the nursery. She's taking pictures. My chest tightened. Hang up and call the police. Now. By the time I pulled into the driveway, a patrol car was parked out front. Nicole was sitting on the curb, talking to the officer with a rehearsed smugness, claiming she was the one being wronged. She claims part of the money you pulled back belongs to her, the officer explained. She says she was documenting evidence that you spent it on yourself. I almost laughed at the absurdity. I want her off my property, I told the officer. And I want it clear that she is not welcome back without permission. As the officer dealt with her, she muttered a threat about getting her lawyer involved. 3 days later, I received an email from a law office. Nicole had attempted to open a civil case against me for misappropriation of funds. The case quickly collapsed. The moment her lawyer reviewed the financial history, years of one-sided payments, no contracts, and no evidence of debt owed, he dropped her as a client. The case died before it even started. A testament to the lack of reality behind her claims. That should have been the end, but a week later, Grandpa called again. She came here last night, he said, his voice sharp. Just after midnight, pounding on the door like the house was on fire. She cried, begged, not apologized, and refused to leave until he worked something out. So, what did you do? I asked. I called the police, Grandpa said flatly. The next morning, he summarized her situation clearly. She's burned every bridge she had. You've stopped being her lifeline. I've stopped being her safety net. And the rest of the family finally sees her for what she is. All she has left now is stubbornness. I knew that desperate stubbornness would continue until the final, most brutal boundary was established. Nicole went silent after her final, desperate attempt to break into Grandpa George's house was met by the police. The tension did not disappear. It just grew tauter, like a wire waiting to snap. I focused on the approaching delivery date, finding a fragile, exhausted peace with Ethan. The calm broke in the most aggressive way possible, on the day our son was born. It was early morning. I was raw and trembling, my body exhausted but flooded with relief. Ethan was beside me in the hospital room, his eyes wet as he looked at our newborn. My phone buzzed from an unknown number. Thinking it was a nurse, I answered. "There's someone in the lobby insisting she's your sister." A woman from the front desk said carefully. "She says she needs to see you immediately." My chest tightened instantly. "Do not let her up," I instructed. "Under any circumstances." 15 minutes later, a nurse came in, visibly rattled. She tried to talk her way past security. The nurse reported. She claimed she was here to sign paperwork for the baby, saying you might not be in a condition to handle it yourself. My hands started shaking. Nicole was escalating beyond manipulation. She was trying to insert herself legally into my child's life. When that failed, she demanded to speak to hospital administration about medical neglect. Security finally escorted her out. The damage, however, was done. That evening, Grandpa George appeared at the hospital. He held an envelope, a letter from his attorney. He told me he had officially removed Nicole and my mother Deborah, not just from his will, but from every trust, every life insurance policy, every legal designation connected to him. I kept it quiet before, hoping they might change, he said. He looked at my son, sleeping peacefully, and his voice hardened. After what she tried to pull today, I want this known. Then he said the words that hit harder than the inheritance itself. I contacted your boyfriend's parents, Grandpa revealed gently. I told them everything, not just about today, but about all of it. I want you to know, Nevaeh, you're not standing alone anymore. That revelation was the highest point of my emotional arc. Nicole had always relied on my isolation. Now, I was utterly and completely protected. From that day forward, the family dynamic was unrecognizable. Nicole and Deborah were not included, not consulted, and not informed. Relatives who once defended them now avoided them. Manipulation had finally lost its audience. I thought that was the ending. But a week after my son was born, when I finally believed the worst was behind us, someone knocked on my door. It was a man in a suit, a process server. The papers he handed me proved with brutal clarity that Nicole was not finished. She had found another way in. The papers served to me felt heavier than they should have. Nicole had filed for a restraining order against me, claiming harassment, and a small claims case demanding reimbursement for money she was never owed. It was pure fiction, but it didn't matter. Seeing my name, attached to those official accusations, felt like a punch to the chest. I had to hire a lawyer and start compiling years of bank statements, texts, and emails, proof that my generosity wasn't theft and boundaries weren't abuse. The truth cost time, money, and energy, which was exactly what Nicole wanted. The stress crept in quietly. I suffered sleepless nights and moments where I'd catch myself staring at nothing while my son slept nearby. 2 days before the first hearing, Grandpa George called. His voice was heavy in a way that scared me. "I've been diagnosed with pneumonia," he said. "The doctors are hopeful, but I'm not bouncing back as fast as they'd like." My heart dropped. He assured me he would be okay, but his pause betrayed his uncertainty. He then shared that Nicole had been showing up at his property at night, banging on the door, demanding to be let in. He'd changed the locks and installed cameras. It was the first time I heard defeat in his voice, and that terrified me. When the court day finally arrived, Nicole walked in looking polished and calm. Her presentation was flawless. She told her story smoothly, twisting details just enough to sound plausible. My lawyer systematically dismantled most of her claims, with bank records and evidence of one-sided payments. Still, the ruling brought no relief. Some accusations were dismissed, but others were set aside for a longer hearing. It wasn't a win or a loss, it was limbo. And limbo was expensive. As we walked out of the courthouse, Nicole glanced back at me with something that looked like satisfaction. Not because she'd won, but because she had successfully pulled me back into her chaotic orbit. That night, I sat in my son's nursery, holding him in the quiet dim light. The truth I had been avoiding finally settled in. People like Nicole don't need to win outright to do damage. All they need is to keep you fighting long enough that you lose in other ways: time, peace, focus, presence. Holding my child. I understood with painful clarity that she had taken something from me I couldn't get back. She had taken my peace. For a long time after the first hearing, I lived in vigilance. The restraining order hadn't gone through, and the small claims case was bleeding out slowly, but Nicole had gone quiet again. This silence was not dramatic, it was profound. And it scared me more than any tantrum, because I knew she was simply waiting for opportunity. The second court date came and went. More of her claims collapsed under scrutiny. I should have felt relieved, but I was hollow. I realized I couldn't remember the last time I had laughed without forcing it. Nicole hadn't taken my money, but she had taken my sense of safety. The day the battle officially ended didn't come with a bang. It came with a thin letter from the court stating that Nicole's remaining claims had been dismissed due to lack of evidence. No apology, no accountability, just a procedural end. I sat at the table holding the paper, while Ethan read it over my shoulder. "It's over," he said softly. I nodded, but it felt like exhaustion, not an ending. Grandpa George came by later that week. He moved slower, leaning heavier on his cane, but his eyes were clear. He held our son for a long time. "She won't try again," he said finally. "How do you know?" I asked. "Because there's nothing left for her to take," he replied. "And she doesn't know how to exist without that." He was right. Nicole didn't disappear because she healed, she disappeared because she was exposed. She lost her audience, lost her leverage, and lost the ability to rewrite reality. My mother Deborah stayed silent. Defending Nicole now meant losing everyone else. That silence was its own kind of ending. Months later, pushing my son in his stroller through a quiet park, I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest: stillness. Not happiness or joy, just deep peace. Nicole had always thought power meant control, and family meant entitlement. But she was wrong. Power was the ability to walk away, and not be dragged back. Family was the people who protected your child when you were too tired to fight. Nicole wanted attention, she got it. She wanted control. She lost it. The last thing she took from me was the illusion that setting boundaries would ever come without a cost. But I knew I would pay that cost again every time. Peace, real peace, is worth more than being liked, more than being generous, and more than being the person who always says yes. The moment I understood that, I stopped being her sister in the way she needed, and started being the mother my son deserved.